Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Rise podcast with me, your host, Katie Oman, women's empowerment coach, author, motivational speaker, and event organizer. I created this podcast as a way to connect with amazing women, not just for myself, but also for all of you, because I believe in the power and the magic of women and women's stories, and being able to share these with you all is just such a blessing. I really think that we lift each other up and we give each other a roadmap out of the darkness and we inspire each other. So that's my intention with this podcast. And I hope that this episode gives you another beautiful space to kind of get into that. So that being said, I have another amazing woman for you today. I know I always say that, but I do. And her name is Louisa Daubney. And I'm so happy and so excited that she's agreed to join me today. Louisa, thank you so much for being here, my darling.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast. It's great to be here, Katie.
Oh, you're very welcome, my darling. So, for those that are maybe not familiar with Louisa or have never seen her before, let's start and kind of a nice introduction about you, for the work you do, and what you're all about. So, tell us all about Louisa.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Louisa. I live in Oxfordshire with my partner and his son, who lives with us during the week. I had a career in fundraising and worked for two amazing charities in the UK, and yeah, worked my socks off, but felt really passionate about the work that I was fundraising for and got to see some of our work around the world. I've been to Yemen, and sadly, it's not a place that we can really travel to right now. My first trip with my previous organisation was to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So
Wow.
my parents, who haven't done a lot of travelling, I guess learned a lot about the different places that I went to through my own experiences. So they did a great job of like, okay, right, as long as we can get hold of you on a mobile phone, then we feel everything's safe for you. I think they're always very impressed that I can't believe you're in another country. We can still kind of connect with you through the power of mobile phones. So yes, so I guess, I cut my teeth on being a fundraiser, and then about 5 years ago, I decided to take a career break. Quite a few things that kind of happened in my life that made me think I just need to take some time out.
Mm.
And then I was inspired to take up coaching. I'd done a short course and thought, actually, I'd like to become a coach. So I did my qualification, and now I'm a personal performance coach, and been spending the last couple of years since qualifying figuring out who I really want to work with. And that's been a journey in itself.
So, what is your niche in the coaching world? Because there's a lot of, I mean, I'm a coach too, right? There's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of people. It's still a very an industry I think that people are still coming into. So what makes you different from the other people out there in terms of the work that you offer?
So it's been an interesting journey over the last couple of years, because I've taken quite a long time, longer than I probably expected to take, to figure out who I really wanted to work with.
Mm.
What's always been at the heart of it has been my interest in how we make sure that we're taking time for ourselves within our working days. And I think we've all had experiences in our careers of working hard, putting a lot of pressure on ourselves, working those long hours, and maybe feeling like we're burning out and feeling kind of like, how's this happened to us? So I've always been interested in, okay, how do we work well in a way that doesn't lead us to burning out and kind of wanting to jack in our jobs? How do
Mm.
we look after ourselves in a world where self-care there's still such a strong connection to the word selfish, which is deeply
Yeah.
frustrating. And yeah, how do we make sure that we're working in a way that works for us? Again, in a sort of society where it's all about the 9 to 5. It's not necessarily about taking lots of breaks during the day.
Mm.
How does that work? So what I've settled on, and I think it works well for me, is I'm calling myself a time design rather than a time management coach. And the reason for the word design is because I see it as up to the individual. And as a fellow coach, you understand where I'm coming from when I say we don't have the answers, and we'd
Yeah.
be really bad coaches if we started saying this is what you need to do. So there is a place for time management guides to inspire
Mm.
us. But for me, what I'm interested in is working with people to help them figure out their unique relationship with how they manage their time and what time means for them, because it means something different to all of us.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's so true. I think we're under so much pressure these days, especially as women. I mean, I am, if you cut me open, I'm like a stick of rock. I've got feminist all the way through. But I do see how the drive to have everything and be everything to some degree has led to more pressure, because now our day is so jam-packed, if we allow it to be, with all of our to-do lists. You know, it's your job and the kids and, you know, the house and self-care and exercise and rest and your partner, and it's just like, yeah, right. And so trying to carve out that time for yourself can almost feel like another thing to do on the list, you know. And I find that a lot with the women I talk to. It's like, I would, but I don't have time, right? That's the thing. And it's almost that this guilt that comes through of like somehow taking care of yourself is a bad thing, right? So I think having somebody like you that can kind of almost reframe it and redirect them and help them see that this is actually necessary, I think is definitely needed, more so than ever.
And I guess I'm also, you know, I like to have the evidence to kind of back up what I'm saying. And of course, what I'm saying is only a personal opinion, and people can say, no, I don't agree. But so far, that hasn't been the case. And you know, the research says that, you know, we need to be taking regular breaks during the day. Our brains can only focus on our, you know, our work for so long, and it's actually for us to take some time away from our desks. I'm a big advocate for morning rituals, and this has taken quite a long time to actually become a thing for me, because I don't know about other people, and I guess, you know, we're now starting to talk about this ourselves, is, you know, for me, meditation is something I know is a good thing. Now, it doesn't work for everybody, but I know it works for me. But until I actually blocked out time in my day for it, it'd be on my list of things to do, even on like a habit tracker. But unless, and it seems so crazy that we have to go to this level, but as you say, our days are jam-packed. If I don't block out that time, and if I don't create a routine around these morning rituals, they just won't happen.
Yeah.
And even though it's like the beginning of the day, like, oh, come on, this is the best time for me to have strong willpower to know these things matter. But I guess as soon as my brain starts to think, oh, well, should I do that or that? And you start kind of questioning the importance of these morning rituals, which we know are so useful for us, then yeah, it doesn't happen. So I guess, yeah, one top tip for the audience, if you want to create time for yourself, and it's for you to decide how much time you have realistically. And the best thing is to really try and start small, because if you kind of go in guns blazing, then it probably leads to more, you know, frustration in the end. But yeah, starting small, blocking out that time, even if it's just 5 minutes to begin with, and see what grows from there. And the more you can do it on a regular basis, the more you're not wrestling with yourself as to whether or not I should do this thing.
It's so true, isn't it? Like I say, you know, if you have a work appointment, or you have a doctor's appointment, or whatever it is in your calendar, unless something drastic happens, you will do your best to meet that appointment. And yet, when it comes to ourselves, we're like on an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, you know, well, you know, I will at the weekend, or I've got a week off in May, I'll do it then. And it's like, and so yeah, for me, it's like actually block the time in your diary, right? You know, I'm going for a walk, or I'm going to go and meet a friend, or I'm going to, you know, read a book. I mean, it sounds stupid to say it out loud, but we have to almost, I think, for me personally, it's been about retraining my brain to break these repeated behaviors of saying, I am important too. And I can't show up for anybody else healthily and fully if I'm not taking care of myself.
Exactly. And in the lines of industry we're in, i.e., you know, serving our clients, supporting our clients, we want to be in the best kind of state that we can be in, to really listen, be curious, be present. And I guess it's different maybe from a standard office job, whatever that really means. But like, particularly in industries where you're really serving others. And actually, even if you are in an office job, I wish I had taken a bit more time to look after myself before I started my day. I was thinking about this at the weekend. It's like, was there anything I did before I opened my computer or turned on my computer at work that was vaguely helpful to myself? And unfortunately, there wasn't anything that I was doing very mindfully. I'd be cramming lots of things in because I didn't value taking that time for me.
Absolutely. And it's so true. I mean, I think it's kind of recognized, and it's just funny, I've just been writing, I'm giving a talk this week about self-worth. And I think it's kind of, it all stems from how much you value yourself, to give yourself that time. You know, whether you're calling it, and I love time design, by the way, I think it's awesome, but wherever you're calling it, you know, our day is so short and it's so precious that if you're not making the most of that time and making it work for you, Burnout is like, it's not, it might happen. I mean, it's highly likely that it will happen. I know that. I've experienced that. And I think the first one, the big thing is, how do we remove the guilt from it? How do we remove this feeling of like you're doing something bad or wrong simply
Yeah.
by trying to better use your time?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And as you say, there's such a strong association between taking time for ourselves and that feeling of guilt, and particularly, as you say, for women and for mums.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's about noticing what happens when you do something positive for yourself, and notice the ripple effects. Because if we're looking after ourselves better, if we're taking that time to ground ourselves, for example, at the beginning of the day, or taking some short breaks during the day and
Mm.
having time for lunch, then how are we then showing up for our friends, our family, our loved ones? I'd say that we're showing up more, being more ourselves and being
Yeah.
more in tune with ourselves. And certainly for me, I guess I'm a, hopefully excuse me, a less stressed person
Yeah.
if I have looked after myself during the day. Because another impact of the society that we live in now, so many of us work from home these days, so many of us rely on our smartphones for work, and those
Mm.
boundaries between work and the rest of our lives are so muddy. Like my
Yeah.
commute now is about, I don't know, 2 seconds. um Whereas in the past it was, I was lucky. I thought this is a short commute, 15 minutes, walk home
Yeah.
was brilliant, because I could really sort of download from the day and be in a
Yeah.
much better frame of mind in the evening. And then our smartphones, I mean, how many of your audience sort of, do you check in with your work emails after the end of the working day? And what does the end of the working day look like these days? And it's so easy just to have a quick flick through, but again, it's just our brains, I think, can only manage quite, so
Yeah.
much. And I guess the more we can try and create those boundaries, the better for all of us. So back to your original question, in terms of like managing that guilt, it's noticing what happens when you do look after yourself, and not
Mm.
just how you feel, how your clients feel, how your work feels, and how it feels to be with your family members, and kind of how they're reacting to you. It's a really tricky one, but it's definitely worth giving it a go and seeing what you notice.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, God, you could talk in my language. I mean, somebody who's self-employed, works from home, is a single parent of twins. Like it's really hard to keep that boundary between work and home because, like I say, with my smartphone, social media, my emails, like I am available all the time. And I used to say like that was a good thing. I would say to my clients,
Yeah.
message me anytime. It's fine. I don't mind. I'm available. But it's not healthy for me because what about me? And I'm making sure that, you have that time. My therapist actually said to me, you are always something to somebody else. What about you? And I think a lot of women need to hear that, you're important too. And it always comes back to that. It's knowing that your value, I think, is really key.
Yeah, definitely. And this talk you're doing about self-worth, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a
Yeah.
fabulous thing, and just kind of making women realize that it's not based on how much money they have or what numbers
Yeah.
on the scale or what job they have. It's inherent. You are worthy because you are here. That's it. Full
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it comes back to that time, you give yourself time because you're here, you're alive, you're part of the society. You deserve to have some time for yourself. It's not something that has to be earned. And that's the other thing I was going to ask you. How do we break that? How do you deserve it? You've earned it because you've done something hard or you've done something crappy. Now I can give myself some time. How do we break that cycle?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting one, because yeah, it shouldn't be about that. And I guess being self-employed, I guess, yeah, that that brings with it its own pressures. And I guess you don't always get the outcomes you're necessarily expecting that you would have got from a paid position, for example. So I think whatever it is that you're working on, whether it's something you're paid to do or something that you're doing within your work that's of interest to you, that doesn't have that financial link to it, we definitely shouldn't be sort of thinking, okay, we earn this much of money, or we've had this kind of successful month of work, and now it means we can give ourselves this kind of time back. I think it's got to be more intuitive. I think
Mm.
we're not robots.
No.
We're human beings. And I guess we haven't mentioned the menopause yet, that I
Mm.
guess, when we get to a certain age as women, Our energy flows are going to be different. We'll
Yeah,
still be expecting the same from ourselves, I'm sure, and I'm sure others will still be expecting the same from us as before. And employers, I guess they're still on their own journey of discovery
yeah,
about what the menopause means for how they look after their female staff. But yeah, I think it's really important that the more we can trust ourselves and be intuitive about what we need, the better it is for not only for ourselves but for everyone.
absolutely, absolutely. I love that. So let's bring it back to you. So, how do people? I'm really interested because I know that telling people what job I do has a reaction from
Yeah.
people, good and bad and ugly. And so, when you tell people your title and the business that you do, how do people respond to you?
Yeah. I think how they respond depends on how I explain what I do
Mm,
initially.
right.
Because
Yeah.
I think sometimes I can feel that I need to sort of really explain what I'm doing, and talk about how I work, and kind of go off on this long kind of introduction. I think the best way of having a conversation with people is asking them questions, and I think I sometimes forget that, even though I'm a coach, and really bringing it back to, tell me more about, your experience with time. I mean, I've had some brilliant discussions lately about this whole thing of, not have it working from home.
Mm,
I don't like this word productivity, but I'm going to use it because I guess it's quite a sort of commonly used term in these sort of situations, that people are interested to talk about. Actually, yeah, I am really productive at home. I spend too much time working sometimes because I'm working from home. It's like, well,
yeah.
that's interesting in its own right. Or I don't take enough breaks. So I think the more I can bring it back to people's individual experiences, whether or not they feel they need a coach themselves, even just having a conversation about our dear mobile phones and the impact that they have on us and the distractions that come from our
Mm,
mobile phones. It's quite fascinating when I start talking to people about, so how what is your relationship with your phone like? How often do you get distracted by it? How often does it stop you from actually doing what you really want to be doing, and what's behind that? So I guess when I talk about what I do, I try to bring it back to the person I'm speaking to, and to try and get their thoughts on what time means to them, how they manage it, how they don't manage it, what are their
yeah.
blockers.
Yeah. It makes sense because, like I say, everyone's situation, everybody's experience is very different, and so having a generalized view is not helpful. And
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of problems with these coaching sometimes, is that we try and say that do this, and it's like, well, that's great if it works for you, it doesn't work for everybody. So yeah, individual is definitely the way to go. um Phone thing is really interesting, and I could feel myself being triggered slightly, which is fine. um Social media, I mean, I think that most people like myself have a love-hate relationship with social media, because I can obviously, from my business, it's been wonderful, and I have family and friends all over the place, so it's great. But I also understand the downside of it in many different ways. And in terms of time, I'm not saying don't go on it, because that's not realistic. But what I do find is I tell myself I'm having a break from work, and I go on my phone, and I'm like, but my brain is still active. My brain is not getting a break.
Yeah.
I tell myself that I am. I tell myself, I convince myself, because you can, right? I
Yes, of
convince
course.
myself that I'm relaxing now. But
Yeah.
I'm not. And maybe just because I'm sitting down and not physically moving doesn't mean I'm actually switched off, because my brain is still very much on. And
Yeah.
then I wonder why, like, after 20 minutes, I feel exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really interesting to kind of like, don't, I suppose, to be mindful of what it is you're doing and why.
Absolutely. And like you, I'm not saying that, okay, we really shouldn't be on our phones, we shouldn't be on social media. Just as you're saying, it's about being mindful when you're on
Mm,
your phone. Because and I guess I'm a bit of a super geek when it comes to creating routines to one's day. And I'm not saying that every single hour needs to be completely blocked, but I'd say there's a time and a place for being on our mobile phones. And as you're saying, it's not necessarily seeing it as like, okay, this is now me having a break. I
mm,
see it as, okay, when's a good time to be on social media? What do I kind of want to get out of this experience? And how do I do this mindfully? And I think for a lot of people, it really helps if they kind of almost set a timer for themselves,
yeah.
because I mean, I'm sure your listeners may have had this experience just like us, that suddenly you're on your phone, you're looking through all these really interesting posts, you're signing up for things. That's often my kind of guilty pleasure. And listening to podcasts here and there, and suddenly the time is gone. It's like, oh, okay, so I didn't actively choose to spend this much time on this. And how's my brain feeling as a result? So I think what I'm an advocate for is, yes, there's a time and a place, and it's figuring out when's the best time for you to be doing that thing. And maybe it's not first thing in the morning. I mean, I used to be really bad at checking the news first thing. And it didn't really put me on in a great sort of positive state of mind. Now I don't, if I can help it, I don't actually check my phone until like after 11 o'clock in the morning. So I'm in a situation where I guess I don't have dependents who may be getting in touch, and I don't need my phone to be close to me. And I appreciate for many listeners that might not be the case, but I guess I've chosen actively when I want to be on my phone. And I'm not saying it works perfectly every day, but I'm more aware of the choices I'm making about when I'm on my phone and for how long, and to try and be more mindful.
Absolutely. I think and definitely it is a work in progress. Like if I'm on TikTok, I give myself a countdown. Okay, Katie, you've got 10 videos. And I'll be literally am I going 10? And I was like 9. Because once I get to, it doesn't matter, well, because you're obviously we're getting the dopamine hit, right? So that's why they're so quick, because you're like, I want another one and another one, another one. But it's like, I have to go, it doesn't matter what the next video is, Katie. You're at 1, turn the phone off. And I'm like, I feel like a little child, like, okay, I'll look at it later.
It's all about these dopamine hits, and it's the same with the notifications. It's like you want to know what's come through.
Absolutely. And so but mindfulness is definitely the way to go. And I think, and it comes back to that time thing. It's like, and to be honest with yourself, how are you spending your day? What are you giving the majority of your time to? Is that working for you? And to have these conversations with yourself, to really think, is there a better way of doing it? And it's not, for me, it's not to criticize what I'm doing, because that's not helpful. But obviously to just think, how would this be better for me, I suppose.
Absolutely. And it's what you're noticing about how you feel at the end of that thing that you've just completed or done. How are you feeling after you've checked your mobile phone? And what would you like to do differently? And I guess being coaches, we're hopefully good at asking ourselves these questions, not just our clients, but it's just about and so, as you say, there's no judgment. It's more about, what do you need as an individual?
Absolutely.
It's not about me telling you what to do.
Absolutely.
A bad coach, if that's what I was doing.
Well, no, absolutely. So I was just thinking, so you started off in with charity work and fundraising, which must have been fascinating, really. And also going to all these places. I mean, I take my hat off to you. Going that far on your own as a woman, well, not on your own, but you know what I mean, as a woman, is incredibly courageous of you. A lot of women would just, they wouldn't even go to like this somewhere here in the country on their own. So the fact that you went all these far-flung places is amazing. If you look back now through the lens of what you're doing and the work you're doing, can you see how, and again, not the critical eye, but to see how perhaps you could have done things differently knowing what you know now?
Yeah.
What would you have changed if you could do it again?
So I'd have changed my my working practices. I would have started my day checking in with how I was feeling before I opened up my computer. I guess I would think I'd be clearer about how I wanted to use my day. Now, I appreciate that in a kind of, want to put a term, like a corporate environment, like when you're working for someone else, working for a big organization, you don't always have as many choices about how you spend your time. But I do remember, I always remember my colleague who would say, these are my email hours. I will only be responding to emails between like 2 and 3 p.m. every afternoon, which I always thought was brilliant, but could never think about how that could work for me. I'd find it very easy to get sucked into my emails and maybe lose sight sometimes of the bigger picture and what I should really be focusing my energy on, particularly first thing in the morning. And again, I've learned a lot about this since becoming a solopreneur. I guess it's easy to start with the easier things, because I guess there's less, you're kind of within your comfort zone. But I don't know how many of your listeners have heard of it's a book called Eat That Frog. It's about getting the I guess the trickiest, most challenging, the toughest thing that you maybe don't want to work on, get that done first, because for many of us, that's when we have the maximum amount of energy. And it's only been recently that I've really started thinking, oh yeah, rather than doing that course that I'm really enjoying doing and have lots of motivation for, let's do that thing that actually I struggle with. And it's it's been brilliant to actually work on that frog first thing, because it's when I've got more energy and more brain power, and there's less of a battle inside my head about what I should do. So yeah, I guess what I do differently now is think more about how I want to start my day, and start with at least one morning ritual. And it didn't necessarily need to take that long, but you know, maybe 5-10 minutes or something. Then focusing on the priority projects. Then I was quite good at getting a hot chocolate around about 11 o'clock, come rain or shine, come summer or winter, and I'd bump into a colleague, and that was actually a nice ritual, not very healthy, but still like got me away from my desk.
Yeah.
And I'd go for a walk at lunchtime, which would be great. But then my hours were not great. I'd often spend longer than I should have done in the office. And I remember this one Friday night being in the office, there were two of us. And it was one of those offices where the lights would only come on if there was like movement. So when there were like less people around, the lights would go off. And then you'd have to like wave your hands to get them to come on again. And this colleague at the end of the office was like, Louisa, why are you still here? And I said something along the lines of, well, the more hours I work, the more I can, you know, more money I can raise, which is not true. Because there's this whole law of diminishing returns. So the longer you work, the less kind of the quality of your work is not going to remain at the same level as it is at the beginning of the day. So looking back, I wish, it may sound, well, I don't think it sounds odd. I would like to have spent less hours in the office. I think it'd be good for my job, good for my well-being. I even missed one of my leaving dues because I think I was burnt out. I didn't know what burnout was, but I was so tired. I was transitioning between one job and another within the same organization, and I just couldn't attend my own leaving due because I just felt so tired. And I think there's still a lot of information that needs to be shared with people about how to work. Don't even like the word smartly, but how to work more intuitively, because we're all different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quality over quantity, isn't it? So it's like if you're working, and they say this, they talk a lot about shorter working week, or you know, all these things, because actually if you've got less time to do the things you need to do, I think as a mother, I tell you, what I can get done in an hour is insane. Like if I've got an hour, I might this, because you know you've got a certain amount of time, so you will just get on with it. Whereas if I have like a few days, well, I'll do a bit here and I'll do a bit there, and you know, it's not the same focus, and that's the point. Is that don't kind of think, like you say, don't lie to yourself, and don't kid yourself of like you're being productive because you're spending more time. Actually, are you being more productive, or are you just kidding yourself and telling yourself that it's actually not actually the truth?
And this is so fascinating, because I'm trying to remember the phrase. It's something like, if you want something done, give it to a busy person.
Yeah.
And then there's a law called Parkinson's law, which is all about, I guess, the time expands to fit the task. Is that the right way around? So it's basically, if you've got, an hour to do something, you'll use that hour wonderfully. But if you've got half an hour, you'll probably still get, a really good job done within that hour, that half hour. So it's just like try and spend a little bit bit less time on something, as you're saying. You get loads done in an hour. I think it's an interesting thing. I asked, did a workshop a few months ago, and I was asking people this question about, tell me about a task that actually took you less time than you thought it would take, and why was that? And I think there's something about challenging ourselves, maybe sort of almost setting a timer and saying, right, how much can I get done in this time? It's like, oh, that's really interesting. I think
it also focuses the mind. It's like blinkers straight away, because you realize it's like some kind of, like the TV show 24 that used to be on. It's like this ticking clock behind you that is like counting down, and so it really focuses your mind. You haven't got time for social media distractions, or making yourself a cuppa. You'll crack on because you know that needs to get done. So sometimes, I'm not saying that works every time, but it's definitely something to play with, I think.
I agree. And I guess, all the things that we're talking about today, and anything I talk to my clients about, it's an experiment. We're all different. Some things will stick and some things won't. But it's like, have you got time to just give it a shot and see what happens? To be curious.
Absolutely. I think also to know that what works for you today may not work for you tomorrow. It depends as well what mood you're in, how tired you are as a woman, where you are in your hormonal cycle. All these things contribute, and it's okay to say, well, I could do that yesterday. Why can't I do it today? Well, try something different. It's fine.
There's a book by somebody called Alyssa Vitti. I've got it here just in front of me, and she talks about there's different, as you're saying, in our monthly cycles, there are some tasks we'll find much easier at some
Yeah,
moments than others. So planning, strategy work, how we communicate with people, how many risks we want to take, how
yeah.
often we'll be out of our comfort zone. So these are all things as well to, again, just notice.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that if you kind of make note of where you are on your cycle and where your energy is, you can then utilize that rather than trying to push, the patriarchal system, which is men's
Yeah.
energy are 24 hours. Of course, women's are 28 days.
Yeah.
So when you're on the down low, when your energy is low, don't expect yourself to show up as when you're at the start of your cycle, because you can't. You
Yeah.
literally cannot. And that's a great time for like reflection and, you know, more quieter, slower activities, because you have to match where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, there's only so much pushing we can do against ourselves, and then our body and our brains will just be like, stop, we just
Mm,
we can't cope with it, we're going
I
to shut
love
down.
that. I love that. And I think as women, I think that's, really important takeaway is that your hormones, whether we like it or not, have a huge effect on your energy, which then has a huge effect on your time. So I really think that it's important that we acknowledge that.
Definitely. Definitely.
So, what's next for you in your career? What's your plans moving forward? Because obviously, you've been on this journey thus far. You've gone from one career into this wonderful work that you're doing now. And being an entrepreneur, I know that the dust doesn't settle too long under the feet. So, what's next for you? What are you thinking, long-term vision?
Oh, so I guess it is. I mean, right now it's very much about establishing my business and really
Mm,
listening to what my clients need, because it's one thing. So I guess I kind of I'm creating this business with, well, I guess with myself in mind, and also with others that I'm speaking to in mind, in terms of, what do they need most. I like the idea in the longer term of maybe being out there more, sort of being a bit of an advocate for change in how we work. We've sort of lightly talked about the 4-day working week,
mm,
and I think that's a really interesting, not just concept, but it's, my partner now has a 4-day working week, and he's feeling the difference, he's feeling the
yeah,
benefits. And I think it's about, and there's a lot of research that's been done which has proved in the UK context that it's working well for people. So there's a part of me that'd be quite interested in being involved in that movement, and just really helping people at a sort of, I guess, my clients, but also maybe have been involved in more conversations that people can hear about in different on different platforms, and being an advocate for change through the work of the 4-day working week people, to start helping people to really think about what work means for them. We're still in the 21st century, but the years are moving on.
yeah,
We're working more from home. Our smartphones have a massive impact. We've talked about all this. What's the next technology going to be? And what's the future going to be for us when we've got things like Chat GPT and all these different
mm,
kind of automated systems? So what does that mean for how we can work in a way that works better for us and for our families? I guess what I care about
absolutely.
is that we have that time for our families. That's really important. And also for our own passions.
I love that, which is, of course, equally as important, because, yes, work is a huge part of our lives, but it shouldn't be all of your life. And
Yeah.
so having time to think about the things away from that is incredibly important. Yes, downtime, self-care, but also, like you say, family time, and also time that, what we would call, if you're at school, extracurricular. What's your passions? What's your things you do for fun? What's your interests? What's your hobbies? I know it
Yeah.
feels a bit probably job interview-ish, but this stuff is important. It gives us balance, and I think it's really important that we make time for that as well.
And I think, as we've described, we have busy lives already, and I think this is where the self-care comes in, that it can help
Mm,
us to start opening up things that are of interest to us. So
yeah,
even if we don't have a lot of time, just giving ourselves the opportunity to think about what we're curious about
yeah,
and what interests us, that when we have a little bit more time, maybe when our kids are a bit older, for example, that we actually explore those hobbies. Because particularly if we're working in an industry or doing a job that isn't quite right for us, the time outside of work is even more important, and maybe it can be a side project that could lead to something more more full-time in the future. So I think if we can take that time, and I guess I'm talking to myself right now as well, because I'm doing well with the self-care, but in terms of like really thinking about the hobbies and the passions that I want to follow, I'm in a stage of being curious about those right now, which is good.
It's great, and it's so. I think it's something that every person benefits from. You know, I my first book was written 9 years ago, and that came as like a long held dream, and then I thought it became like, I'm just going to let myself try and see what happens, and that was kind of a hobby with a purpose, I suppose you call it. But from there, I mean, like all these years later, and I'm started writing my 10th book. I mean, it's like you never know where things are going to lead, and then it's not about having, I think, an end result to everything you do. It's not about, well, I'll do this to earn money, or I'll do this for my professional development. Sometimes it is just for the sake of doing it, but that doesn't mean that it's not of worth and value, you know. And I think exploring those things is as equally as important.
And given everything you've said already about your life and everything, all your responsibilities, I guess in my head I'm like, oh my goodness, it's amazing you've written all these books. How have you found the time? And this is the magic of, like, if you have a sense of something you want to do, if you're passionate about it, you'll find the time. And as somebody who already said that they're a bit of a sort of routine geek, breaking it down to bite-sized chunks, finding those pockets of time, it's remarkable how it builds up. And you can find the time to follow your dreams, even
What's
if
your
you're
priorities, right? So I always say this because I now work as a book coach and help people write their own books, and I say, if I gave you 6 weeks away in a cabin in the woods somewhere and said, go write the book, you wouldn't. You'd be sweeping the cabin, you'd be out on walks, you'd be like foraging in the forest, like, and all the time you'll be going, I'll do this, then I'll do some writing. I'll do this, then I'll do some writing. Whereas the way I write is I get greedy with my free time. I prioritize. So when I do have a moment, I'm not, I mean, again, I'm not like every second I'm like writing, because I do go on my phone and I do watch television and I, you know, whatever. But it's where your priorities are. And I think that really, again, it's that quality of quantity. Quality over quantity. We should go the way around. So I mean, it really is, where is your focus, basically.
And I guess there's that whole kind of almost like robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's like the trade-offs you make. So I could either spend half an hour on this, or I can spend half an hour on that. We all have 24 hours in the day. Yes, we need different amounts of sleep, for example, but you know, what choice we have some choices in how we spend our time, and I think some of our choices are more mindful than others.
Absolutely.
And it's exciting, and it doesn't need to take long to spend time working on a book in a given sitting. You can get a lot done in 15-20 minutes.
Exactly. I love that, Louisa. And I knew, and I know I always say this, but genuinely, I was fascinated when I realized what you do. And I thought, this is going to be a really good conversation that's going to really resonate with a lot of people watching it, because we all have, you know, we all need to probably be a bit more mindful of our day and the way we're spending our time. And I think conversations like this really kind of start to get into the headspace, and we start to think about these things. So it's been fascinating, and I really just thank you for having this chat with me. I think it's been fab.
Oh, wow, it's been lovely to be here, and I guess it's something I'm really passionate about talking about. So thanks, Katie.
Which shows, you can see how much you really are driven by it. It's fabulous. So for people who want to know more about the work you do and kind of all that good stuff, where can we find you online?
Okay, so you can find, I've got a website, and it was updated just a few days ago with lots of flowers and lovely illustrations. So I'm really glad it kind of captures more who I am. So that's literally my name. So louisadaubney.co.uk. And then I'm also on Instagram. And then again, that's my name, at Louisa Daubney. And then there's a freebie that I'd love to share, which I guess we can add to the show notes. And that's all about mastering your schedule. It's things we've been talking about today. 10 steps to create a daily routine that really works for you, because I'm a big advocate of blocking out time for those regular things, and then there's like less willpower needed to do them, because you know you have to do them at some point. So let's do them efficiently, so you've got more time to do more of the things that matter to you.
Oh, fabulous. We're all going to be running and checking that out. And when after the podcast, of course, finish the podcast and then run over and go have a look. Yes, of course, all this is down here in the show notes, so do go and check it out because it just sounds fab. So, Louisa, thank you again, and it's just been wonderful. And no doubt our paths will no doubtly cross again. I'm making up words now, but yes, they will cross again.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And to you guys watching, thank you for tuning in yet again. And you know, if you feel drawn to, give me a little subscribe, like and share the video. It all really means a lot to me. And I will definitely see you all on the next one. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.